Hey, what's up, everybody? Grant Wise here, and I'm very excited for our conversation today. I've got Stacy Walton with 24/7 Electric, and I'm excited to dive in, learn more about 24/7 Electric, and even more about all things electricity and real estate. So, Stacy, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me, Grant. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Love it. Well, first, give us all a little bit of the backstory on 24/7 Electric.
Originally, we were commercial, industrial, residential. We kind of provided everything to everyone. And we found back in 2014, there was really a niche that was lacking in the market of servicing homeowners for what they needed. And so in 2014, we rebranded to residential service only to 24/7 electric. And ever since then, we've just been working to change the idea of what it means to have a trade in your home.
I love that. Can you expand on that a little bit more? What it means to have that in your home?
So we find that having a trade in the home can be frustrating because there has been limited availability for residential service solely. And so you're always competing with someone that might be a bigger job for that trade. And then you get put on the back burner as a homeowner for a small service job while they go off and do a larger job or a quote or an estimate that they might see to be more fruitful. And that can be really frustrating. And so we offer guaranteed appointment times, upfront pricing, and that way there's a lot of transparency about what it is that you're paying for before we begin, and educating the homeowner prior to beginning on what we're going to be doing for them.
That makes sense. You and I, obviously, we spend a bit of time working with real estate professionals. What do you think are some of the top things? Give me two or three items, maybe, that real estate agents really need to know when it comes to electrical work and real estate. We were talking a little bit about this, and you'd mentioned a few things. What are just some must, you like, if you want to be a real estate agent and you want to be taken seriously, you really must educate yourself on these couple of things related to electricity so that you can speak about it in an educated way to the consumer?
Yeah, so we have a very diverse building code that has happened over many, many years. And so whether you're selling a home from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, there's homes from those timelines where they had electrical installed that no longer cuts it. And when you make the sale of a home, that is when you get hit with it, when a panel needs to be upgraded because it's too old. There's aluminum wiring, and so the insurance companies won't insure the home. And so it makes it difficult to sell that home unless it's been remediated. Understanding that a 60 amp panel is only acceptable for a certain amount of square footage now, and 100 amp is the norm. So there are some things with the code and how it's changed over the years that are very important to know, so that when the sale of the home happens and that transaction happens, there's no surprises for either side, whether it's the buyer or the seller.
What are the implications of that? I mean, let's say you run into something when you're in the middle of a home sale and something's not up to code. Like, what happens? What has to happen?
Well, if they're trying to do, say, a sale on a home with suited basement that was unpermitted, the buyer is generally going to be asking for that permit information to make sure that the suite is legal so that they can utilize that as income for their home when they purchase it. Now, if it's not permitted and we go to try to permit it, it most likely is going to fail inspection if it hasn't been looked over prior to and any deficiencies addressed. The biggest issues are generally that you're over your load calculation limit, or there are insufficient smoke detectors supplied in the areas that are required both by electrical and building codes.
So, does the buyer then bear responsibility for bringing it up to code? It becomes a financial burden, or does it stop the sale of a home?
It doesn't necessarily have to stop the sale of a home if they are able to do a couple of different things. One, a home inspector is going to find the problems with the general electrical issues. They may not know all of the code, but they're pretty well versed in what they're looking for. So one of the things that they can do is provide us with the home inspection so that we can provide a ballpark estimate that allows them to go to negotiation. So, as the buyer, you may not necessarily be responsible for it financially, but the seller may not be responsible for fixing it. They may give you a deal and then you go ahead and take care of that on your own later. So, there are different avenues that can be done. A big one that is done most often is that we will be hired to come in and do a concealed wiring inspection. And from that inspection, we're able to determine ahead of time what the electrical issues will be. We produce a deficiencies report, and then whether they choose to hire us or not, they are able to at least get those deficiencies completed so that they can bring in an inspector to have it permitted. So it's not the end all be all to have these things kind of pop up or happen. There are definitely ways to take care of it.
And a lot of what you're talking about to me also sounds like leverage for negotiations, right? I mean, do you guys do stuff like that where you provide reports on certain things that realtors are using in negotiations?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things is the ballpark estimate, and we call it a ballpark estimate. We've been doing this long enough that our estimations from a home inspection list are pretty accurate. And so using that for negotiations is generally enough to find the figure that they need to bring stuff up to code. You could really love the house, but there are just some things that need to be done. And those small minor things really shouldn't stop the sale of the home. It really is just about going through that list, determining what the costs are, and negotiating with the other side about what they're going to provide so that you can bring it up to code.
In your experience, when is the best time typically to call 24/7 electric? Let's say I'm a real estate agent, I'm showing my clients a house. Kind of walk me through that. Like, when are you typically advocating to the realtor that they call you in on something? Is it before they go under contract? Is it after? Are you seeing all types of scenarios like that?
We kind of see typically the scenario where the buyer wants to make an offer and we will get a call in regards to concerns, not necessarily at the point of home inspection, but just concerns that either the potential buyer had when they went in or that the realtor saw when they went in. They'll give us a call and we will be able to walk them through whether or not these are very large concerns or smaller concerns. And what can kind of be done and whether they should proceed. Like, is it worth it to them at that point? Like, what degree of severity is it? So, when they get to the point of the home inspection and the home inspection has been completed, they'll generally call us or send that over so that we can do a estimation based on that for them to go back with for negotiations. Generally, those are the two times. There's not a lot of instances where we get a phone call prior to something unless the realtor just generally has a question or after. Sometimes we do get pulled into legal negotiations when there is some dispute about that because we weren't consulted prior to this. And so there's an argument about who's responsible for what. So we'll often get brought in during that time to kind of give them our expertise advice on what they should be doing or how it should have played out.
That makes a lot of sense. Love it. What are the things that you wish or that you're always saying to yourself, like, oh, more real estate agents need to know this? Like, what are some of the top few things that you feel like agents really need to know when it comes to electricity and home ownership that can help them be better realtors for the clients they serve?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is aluminum wiring is really such a big topic. Standard building code, the aluminum feeding the home, the actual the power coming into the home is often aluminum. And sometimes they will see that by a rating or there's a marking of some sort, and it becomes a red flag to them when it really shouldn't. Aluminum wiring really is a concern when it's in the branch circuits and there's a mix between the aluminum and the copper. I really wish that they understood that and understood that once it's been remediated, the remediation methods that are on the market make the remediation safe for many, many years to come, for their lifetime. We warranty our remediation up to 25 years. So the aluminum wiring and understanding how that affects everything, and then really understanding that There is some larger issues with suited basements, and that it should be addressed prior to negotiations, not afterwards and realizing that there's a problem, but really getting somebody to understand if it hasn't been permitted, then it needs to be permitted. It may not affect them now, but it's going to affect them when they purchase the home and they're trying to get somebody in there, or they're making changes. And then the last thing is the change in the requirements in the allowed load capacity on a panel. So a panel has been derated to 95.6 amps. That ampage, so you see a panel, it's 100 amps. The 95.6 amps is what we are allowed to max it out at. And realistically, in a home these days, that's just simply by adding air conditioning. So then if you're looking for a hot tub or an EV charger, you're looking to upgrade to 200 amps, these are some things that should be discussed with your buyers prior to what are their needs, what are their future needs, and is this home's electrical system going to have that capacity? Because really, within the first few months of owning that home, those home buyers are going to figure that out. And it's not necessarily going to make them very happy if it's something that they are not able to accommodate their future dreams of having a hot tub or an EV charger, an electric vehicle in their home.
Of course. Yeah. Those are a lot of great tips. And another question that came up for me while you were talking about it is, are there things right now in the current market that people are asking for a lot? Like you bring up EV chargers. I would imagine that's only a growing request, but are there things like that that homeowners are asking for a lot right now?
Yeah, so there are two, and the electric vehicle is really the number one. Three, actually. I'll say electric vehicle is number one. Increase to a 200 amp service would be second, and then solar panels and capacity would be the third. Now, for an electric vehicle, adding that to a home, there are ways to mitigate the load in the home with what it's called a load miser. So it's a load management system that allows us to subtract some of the ampage that's being used in the home with this management system. The other being the 200 amp service. Not every home can do a 200 amp service. First of all, our grid doesn't support that capacity. We have to get permission from NMAX inside of the city to allow us to upgrade a home to 200 amps. And there's a lot of steps that happen in between that. Is the line feeding the house large enough for 200 amps? Does the infrastructure for the home allow for 200 amps? So does the transformer in the alley or on the front of the house, those green boxes you see, is there enough room for that home to expand to 200 amps? And if there isn't, we have to tell them no. Now, there are ways around that, but it's a costly $30,000 to $50,000 price tag to the homeowner if NMAX deems it's not their responsibility to upgrade the infrastructure. So there's a lot that goes into that. And then solar. Solar in Alberta can be very tricky. We don't have a lot of incentives for the homeowner. There is a couple of buyback programs, and then there are also limitations on the size of solar that you can put on based on NMAX's policies. So there are just some things out there that really can change the way someone looks at purchasing the home based on their future needs and what can really affect the home based on those items that we get talked about all the time.
That's awesome. Sounds like if an agent is ever in need, they just need to call Stacy. If there's ever any
I'll
confusion.
try to answer their questions. Yeah.
Well, and this is the thing about real estate is you really need to know just enough. Like you don't have to be an electrical expert to be a real estate agent, but you do want to know just enough that you can speak in an educated way about the things related to the home. And then you want to surround yourself with great partners, which is why having you guys a part of our preferred partner programs are so important because it gives us an outlet. It gives us a resource that we can tap into and that we can connect with whenever we have these questions so that we can serve the needs of the customers at the highest level possible. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate you sitting here and talking to me for 20 or 30 minutes about a lot of this stuff. It's so interesting. And I appreciate you just being a resource for our agents And just want to continue to encourage anybody watching this, reach out to Stacy when you have questions, you have comments, you have concerns. She is an incredible professional that can help you. And so, Stacy, thank you again for being one of our partners. And thanks again for taking the time to sit and chat with me today about all of this electrical stuff. I don't fully understand it, but I'm glad you do. And I'm grateful that I can reach out to you anytime I need something.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Grant. I was happy to be here.
I love it. Okay, awesome. If you're listening to this, call Stacy. If you have a question, certainly take the value that you got here today, reach out to her, let her know how much you appreciate her, and definitely reach out to her when you have any electrical needs for any of your clients.